when is computational thinking and the discourse around it a form of epistemological colonization? So colonizing our ways of learning or knowing. So for example, in this particular paper, and again, this is not a critique for the authors, there was phrasing that computational thinking needed to be prioritized by district leaders on page 21. On page 28, they mentioned that it's really important for young children to learn computational thinking because this sets up pathways to get into other areas of computing. Then on like page 18 and 19, it's talking about how computational thinking gives some skills that allows people to understand technology and computing processes. And so I agree that, yeah, maybe computational thinking would be useful for understanding computing, but why is it that makes it necessary to learn in literally every subject area, which is what was proposed in this particular paper and has been proposed in many other papers that I've looked at. If computational thinking has skills and practices that are specific to solving problems, what if those problems don't need computing devices to solve them? So why is it that we view everything from a technocentric framing? Yeah, it's pervasive in society, but it's not pervasive in every single academic domain. And even if it is, it's for different reasons than just to solve problems. To dive a little bit deeper into the questioning, the way that people discuss computational thinking is that it often comes across as reifying a collection of tools. But a collection of tools is not a heuristic or process to think through. So because computational thinking isn't really a process to go through, it's often framed within discrete tasks or activities, but rarely is it actually discussed in relation to broader learning goals or purposes of studying a particular subject area. So if we use language from like Wiggins and McTighe, who talk about understanding by design and big ideas, these are the questions that are core to a subject area that not only can students explore, but professionals in the field are also exploring it. And a lot of the big ideas that I have seen in different subject areas, in my opinion, aren't going to be answered through computational thinking. But little problems that arise in relation to those big ideas might benefit from some forms of computational thinking, but a lot of these domains honestly have their own frameworks for thinking through. So for example, design thinking is very useful for engineering and design, and it is a process, or at least it is framed as a process of empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing. It can be a linear process, but it also has the opportunity to cycle back through the process at any given point. This is very different than a collection of skills and practices, that people can actually agree what skills and practices count as computational thinking and what skills and practices do not count as computational thinking. So for me, what I'm wondering out loud is, why is computational thinking more important than a heuristic like design thinking? And why is it so important that it's being encouraged to be pushed into every single subject area? Why can't it just be a tool or a set of tools that is used when it is needed, rather than promoted as something everyone needs to do in every subject? So to combine this questioning of this collection of tools with the previous point about epistemological colonization, again, this is me reflecting on the points of this paper. This is not a critique of the authors by any means. But the way that people generally talk about computational thinking is it's as if scientists who are really passionate about the scientific method said that every subject area should learn and use the scientific method. But the way that they talk about it is as if they only spoke about instances where it sort of applies to a subject area, but isn't actually getting at some of the bigger ideas or core ideas within that subject, but instead are just finding almost like a affirmation or confirmation bias examples of where it might sort of fit. But the biggest difference that I see between this hypothetical scenario of scientists engaging in epistemological colonization through the scientific method is actually a process to think through with some steps that people agree upon, and not just like a relatively vague set of skills that can be interpreted many different ways. So one thing that I think might be helpful for the field is to define, when is it not computational thinking? So for example, it's framed as a problem-solving approach, but not all learning is problem-based, nor are there any set of skills or practices that are universal to solving any given problem. So when does it make sense to engage in computational thinking, and when does it not make sense to engage in computational thinking? So while we tend to highlight instances where computational thinking fits within a discrete activity, we also need to talk about when it does not make sense to use computational thinking. I think this would help educators immensely. However, I also think it would be very helpful for the field to really take a look at Kafai and Proctor's discussion of computational literacies, which I think helps clarify some of the issues that I see with computational thinking, and in my opinion provides a more useful heuristic to think through. This excerpt of the CSK8 podcast is from episode number 128, and it's titled Computational Thinking for an Inclusive World, a resource for educators to learn and lead.